Hello, the world. This is They Will Kill, a true crime podcast. I am Courtney-Eck.
And I'm Sadie-Eck.
And it's Sadie's night, and in celebration of that, I dressed like a boss bitch from the 80s.
Yeah.
If you're watching us on YouTube, I've got a very Robert Palmer music video thing going on.
I like the shoulders.
Power blazer for maximum respect.
I have a very nice collar on.
Yes,
you can't
very
see.
French. Yes.
Yeah.
So a little something for everyone, but you're not here for strong collars. You're here for murder.
Yeah, let me tell you about a really, really terrible one.
What do you got for us tonight, Sadie?
This is the investor fishing boat murders.
Excuse me?
Mm-hmm. In September 1982, Mark and Irene Colhurst, along with their two young children, 5-year-old Kimberly and 4-year-old John, were in the middle of a busy fishing season in the small town of Craig, Alaska. Originally from Blaine, Washington, the young family recently purchased a new state-of-the-art fishing boat called the Investor, which was described as impressive and was more of a ship than a boat. At 58 feet long, was estimated to cost $850,000.
What year are we in?
82.
Oh my God! So that's
It's like
with inflation,
$700 million.
$700 million. That is wow.
Yes, fancy boat. Mark was an experienced and well-liked captain, and the family was able to make a profitable living, clearly. With their $750 million boat.
Good for them.
Mark and Irene were high school sweethearts and got married soon after graduation. Irene was pregnant with the couple's third child, and they loved to bring their children along for the fishing season so they could all be together through the summer months. They thought of it as a grand adventure.
Aww.
Mark had started working as a commercial fisherman in 1970 when he was only 16 years old. He was described as super smart, hardworking, and he invested everything he had into his family. The ship's name was a reflection on his lifestyle and ambitions. He told people he planned to retire at 50.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Big time.
I better hurry, man. Like fast. Got 10 years.
Go to They Will Kill / Patreon
retirement fund.
/ retirement fund.
Yes. The boat was large enough to be the temporary home for a decent crew. At the beginning of the season, Mark hired 4 teens, 19-year-old Dean Moon, Jerome Keown, Mark's cousin, Michael Stewart, and 17-year-old Chris Heyman to work on the boat for a few weeks. So like fresh as a daisy teenagers.
Fresh baby teens. Yeah.
The
I don't
crew,
like where this is going.
It's so sad.
I cannot. No.
The crew had worked well together that year, and during the last week of August, they had even managed to bring in 77,000 pounds of salmon.
I'm no salmon expert, and I'm definitely no math expert, but I know that with inflation, that is 750 million pounds of salmon today.
Yes. It is
Holy
so much.
Shit.
Yes, it's so crazy. None of the teens on board planned to make fishing their career. Chris was just out of high school and would be turning 18 soon. Dean was a high school football star who had just graduated. Michael was a college student, and so was Jerome. Mark handpicked them because they all got along, and he'd worked with all of them except for Jerome before. On September 5th, the crew docked, and Mark was expecting to sell the salmon they'd caught for around $30,000.
That's it? Come on. That's so much. Salmon, maybe salmon was a little bit more readily available in the 80s.
Yeah.
I do feel like with inflation, that would be about $750 million worth of salmon.
And you think about, too, like the fishermen are the start of the selling process. So they sell the salmon, and then somebody has to pay to process it, and then they have to put it to the grocery store. So by the time it gets to you, it's not as cheap as you would buy it straight from the fisherman.
Right.
That's my point.
But if that was 77,000 pounds, I can do a little math. Watch this. And they sold it for $30,000. That's like 50 cents a pound. Right. And I know that salmon is like $14 a pound currently.
Right. Yes.
So
With
salmon
inflation,
was
it probably adds up.
a lot of money now.
Yes.
Yes, it would be a lot of money. Not that 30,000 anyway. Yes, a lot of money.
The Alaska Game and Fish Department had temporarily halted the fishing season that day. So as a result, they would all have a few extra days in Craig. Because of the temporary halt, port was busy, and Mark had to dock the Investor next to 2 ships. They were called the Defiant and the Decade. This meant those aboard the Investor would have to walk across the decks of 2 of the other boats to reach the dock. Does that make sense?
Maybe.
So there wasn't room for the Investor to be right up against the dock, and so the boats would kind of connect together, and so the Investor crew would have to go across 2 boats to get to the dock, just because there wasn't a room for everybody.
Got it.
Jerome and Dean went ashore together to make phone calls and to visit the local bars. The movements of Mike and Chris that night are still unknown, although it is likely they too went in town for a drink or meal. The family had plans that night to celebrate Mark's 28th birthday at a restaurant in town called Ruth Ann's. By 10 p.m., they were back on their boat. A crew member aboard the Decade remembers young John sticking his head in to say goodnight. The next morning, September 6th, at around 6:30 a.m., one of the Decade's crewmen observed the Investor drifting away. From inside his boat, he saw a man in the Investor's pilot house at the wheel, and he waved. The man in the Investor waved back.
Ew.
The crewman assumed it was Mark. As the day began, a thick fog came over the bay, making visibility in the water difficult, but as the next morning started, the fog lifted. In the afternoon of September 7th, crew members working on a trawler named Casino were the first to notice thick black smoke billowing up into the sky. They alerted authorities in Craig and then took their fishing boat less than a mile across the water to see if they could help. They ended up at Fish Egg Island, which is on the west side of Prince of Wales Island. There they saw the Investor engulfed in flames. On the way to the fire, they passed a skiff, which is one of those like little small boats. It's almost like a raft that, bigger boats will have.
Yep.
That was heading away from the fire. They briefly stopped to talk to the man and asked him if there were people on the Investor that needed help, and the man said yes, before speeding off back to town. They thought he was heading back for help. The crew on the Casino tried to put out the fire themselves, but the heat was too intense, and they weren't able to get close enough. The fire would burn for 42 hours.
Whoa! I mean, of course it will. There's so much flammable shit in a boat, as far as I'm aware. Things got to go a long way with no gas stations, so...
Right. Well, I'm not sure what they had available for fires on the water. Like, I don't... Right. I'm assuming that Craig, Alaska probably isn't equipped with, like... a fireman's Coast Guard boat or whatever.
State of the art. Also, guess what water does? It freezes. It would be really hard.
Yeah. This is September, so it's probably not yet totally frozen, but yes, it's cold, and they just... Doesn't sound like there was much they could do. Just put out the fire.
Oh, that's awful. Ugh.
So once it was out, authorities towed what remained of the boat to shore and started to search the rubble. Inside the area of the pilot house, investigators found 4 bodies. 3 belonged to adults, and the other 1 belonged to a small child.
Like a small child?
Well, remember, Kimberly and John were 4 and 5 years old.
Right.
At first, it's believed everyone aboard the Investor died in a tragic accident, but medical examiners would find that all 4 bodies which would later be identified as Mark, Irene, little Kimberly, and Mark's cousin Michael, were riddled with bullet holes.
Oh my God.
They had been murdered. Unfortunately, only small bone fragments were found for the remaining people on the boat, but enough remains were located that authorities knew all 8 people had been killed.
Jesus.
Yep.
Leave them alone. What do you want? They're all that salmon? No.
Yeah.
Fishing is dangerous enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I assume that fishing in Alaska in the 80s especially was probably real sort of Wild West.
Totally. Yes, pirates. Yes.
Yeah, drug smuggling.
And you do make tons and tons and tons of money as fishermen. I don't know if people are like robbing each other of their fishing hauls, but it is very profitable. It's so dangerous, and that's why people do it, because it makes so much money.
I get the impression that the fishermen are pretty close-knit. Like, they help each other out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So they're not necessarily stealing from each other, but who knows?
Yeah, boat life. Those boat people, they love each other. It's all they just sit on their boats and fucking Margaritaville it up, right?
Yep.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, we had an old roommate who would go to Alaska to fish in the summers and would come back it felt like he was part of not a sorority, a fraternity, or they all really bonded to the people that he was on the boat with, because you have to be.
I would do it just for the nicknames that inevitably would come with fishing in Alaska, right?
Yes,
I'd be like Scar.
I was gonna say Slinky.
Drifter. Yeah, you'd be Slinky, and I'd be Drifter. Yeah. Yep.
No. Authorities also
Slinky.
found. I don't know why that came to mind, but we're going with it.
Yep.
Authorities also found evidence of arson and believe the killer had set fire to the boat to destroy any evidence.
No doubt.
Investigators would later tell Mark and Irene's family that the way the bodies had been found, it looked as if Mark had been trying to protect Irene by covering her body with his when they were shot.
No thanks. No thank you.
Yep. As police moved in to investigate the crime scene, word spread of the terrible tragedy. Unfortunately, the fishing season was quickly coming to an end, and people were already leaving Craig in droves. Police worried their suspect could already be gone. Witnesses started to come forward immediately to help piece together the investor's last movements. A crewman from a boat docked near the investor said he was in a deep sleep around 2 a.m. on the night of September 5th, when he was awoken by multiple popping sounds. He said he looked out his porthole and saw a, quote, shadowy figure moving across the docks, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so he went back to sleep. The crew for the Decade told investigators about the man they had seen driving the investor away on the morning of the 6th. You know, the one that waved? They remembered that the investor's motor wasn't running as it left the dock, which was odd, and they also found tie-down lines from the investor left on the deck of the Decade. Fishermen would never just leave perfectly good tie-downs behind.
No.
So the guy was sneaking, right?
Yeah.
Like, not turning on his motor.
Yep. Like teens do when they leave or sneak out of their parents' house.
Right.
But not that at all.
No.
Way deadly, awful version of that.
Yeah. The man piloting the boat was described as being in his 20s, stocky with light brown hair, a pockmarked complexion, wearing a red and black plaid jacket. In the morning before the fire, witnesses saw the investor floating in open water near Fish Egg Island and thought it was odd because there was still plenty of fish to catch, but the boat wasn't moving. Despite thinking it was odd, no one decided to investigate. So the boat stayed for quite a while before the fire, and investigators thought that maybe the killer hoped the boat would sink.
Right. Yep.
You know, did something to the boat to get it to sink. It didn't, and so then
Right.
went back and started the fire, like
Got
a
it.
whole day later.
Wow.
Witnesses also saw the investor's skiff leave the investor and ferry between Fish Egg Island and Craig. People assumed it was a new crew member going back to Craig for supplies. This unidentified man went into one of the stores and purchased 2.5 gallons of gasoline before getting back on the skiff and heading back out. There were even witnesses who saw the man after he got back to Craig. They said he was talkative and told people about the fire, so got back to Craig after the fire had started. He even talked to the mayor of Craig at the time.
Bro. No.
The mayor. In an interview with People, the mayor, Lee Axmaker, said, quote, I saw the guy in the skiff. He was a cool character. He came up, talked to a few people, made a phone call, and left. Investigators located the skiff but were unable to retrieve any evidence from the boat because of a heavy rain that had fallen in the days since the murders took place. Despite having so many eyewitnesses, no one was able to identify the main suspect. So nobody knew who this guy was. I know, even though he's talking to the mayor.
And driving back and forth and waving at folks, and it's a boat.
Yeah,
Ugh.
and I heard that, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Craig had, at the time, like 600 people. It was a tiny
I was going to say,
town.
like, how many people live here? The mayor is one of 5 people, so of course he talked to the mayor, because there's only like 11 people to talk to.
I'm sure during fishing season, the population like quadruples, and he can't possibly know all of the fishermen that come in, but still, somebody.
Yeah, no, I'm not blaming the mayor. I'm just saying, yeah, he ran into the killer ran into the mayor because the mayor is just there. There's only
he's one of 5 people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A few days after the massacre, a quote local rescue worker was at one of the bars in Craig. While there, he saw a man having a few drinks who fit the description of the suspect everyone was looking for. So he was at a bar. He saw a dude that matched. Yep. Yeah.
He's like, you are not one of 11 people who live here.
Right.
Ding, ding, ding. Spidey senses.
He called authorities right away, and they decided to bring the eyewitnesses from the casino boat into the bar to see if they recognized the stranger.
Wow. Just brought him on down there.
Real quick. Yeah.
All right.
Because, again, we've got like
11 people.
Right.
Call Bob. Call Kevin.
Right.
Get him down here. No, we do not need Derek. Derek can stay home. He was not present.
What about Chad?
Definitely don't bring Chad. He will fuck this up. The guy cannot keep a secret.
Right. They had them go into the bar to see if they recognized the man from the boat fire. After taking a close look, they came out and said no one in the bar looked like the man they had seen.
Shit.
With very little to go on, police decided to go ahead and talk to the man to rule him out as a suspect. He willingly answered officers' questions and showed them his ID. He was identified as 24-year-old John Peel. Peel was also from Washington State and told police that he was a deckhand on a boat called the Libby 8, which had been one of the boats docked next to the investor the night of the murders. Peel said he'd been on his boat sleeping on September 5th and hadn't seen or heard anything suspicious. He also
Likely story.
He also admitted to knowing Mark and his family and said that he'd even dated Mark's sister, Lisa, a few years back. Peel had gotten to know the Colhurst family well, and Mark had even hired him to work on his fishing crew. When friends and family were asked about the relationship between Peel and Mark, everyone said the two had been friendly and there weren't any bad feelings between them. When Peel and Lisa broke up, he and Mark lost touch and hadn't talked in a long time before Mark's death. That's according to Peel.
Got it.
To investigators, this was too much of a coincidence, and without any other good leads, they continued to look into Peel. Unfortunately, they couldn't find a single piece of evidence to tie him to the crimes, so they had to keep digging.
You're off the hook, Peel.
A year after...
Oh, Sadie says,
I don't know. A year after the massacre, police decide to go back and interview people close to the case once again to see if they can get new information. They talked to the captain of the Libby 8, Larry Denmar. The first time police talked to him, they believed he was holding information back, and they hoped he'd be more forthcoming. So they had interviewed him before and decided to come back. The first time Larry was interviewed, he said he didn't know where Peel had been the night of the murders and hadn't seen or heard anything suspicious. A year later, when asked again, he completely changed his story.
Nope.
And said that he'd been walking back from his girlfriend's house the night of September 5th around 10 p.m. As he passed the investor, he noticed people on deck talking and drinking. One of those people happened to be John Peel. Larry also said he was certain Peel hadn't spent the night on the Libby 8 that night. And then he says that there were guns on board of his ship, but they were unaccounted for the night of the massacre.
Bro, come on. Like, what? Where was this information 1 year ago?
Right? Yes.
I mean, I'm sure, like, the liability of... I've watched enough Below Deck to know. If anybody even does, like, Xanax on a ship without logging it with the ship log, they get in big trouble. Like, the captain can lose his license and stuff. So,
Right.
for the benefit of the doubt of that dum-dum, I'm going to assume that he didn't say that in the beginning because he didn't want to lose his captain's license for losing a bunch of guns to one of his deckhands who was partying on another ship.
Right.
Got it.
Something. Who knows?
Something. Right.
Yeah. But yes, something. I don't know.
Yep.
I just think it's very interesting that he would suddenly have all of these big pieces of information.
Yeah, pretty crucial pieces of information as far as I'm aware, having done 200 plus true crime podcast episodes.
Right. So both weapons were the same type of caliber of the bullet casings found at the scene and could have been the murder weapon. Larry said he hadn't been able to find the guns for a few days, but later located them in a different spot on the boat, not a place he'd normally keep them. Mm-hmm. He turned over the weapons to the detectives for forensic analysis. Larry would later say he didn't realize Peel was the focus of the investigation and had held back the first time he talked to police because he didn't trust them, but after sitting on the information for a year, he decided to tell them what he knew.
Fair enough.
Police also talked to a different member of the Libby 8 crew who said that Peel had had two of the investors' crew, Jerome and Dan, on board the ship just a few hours before they were killed to sell the marijuana. Mm-hmm. Authorities decided to bring Peel back in for questioning. He admitted to selling weed to Jerome and Dan and opened up a little bit more about his relationship with Mark. He told police he'd actually been fired from Mark's fishing boat. They had worked together for 2 to 3 years, but Peel smoked too much pot, and Mark had strict no drugs or alcohol while working policy.
Yeah.
Fair enough, right?
Fair enough. Yes,
Right.
That's very dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. And you can lose your captain's license according to Below Deck.
Yes. So Peel couldn't follow these rules, so Mark fired him. It was rumored that Mark had even gone so far as to bar Peel from coming onto his boat after he was fired, but Peel insisted there were no hard feelings between them. Around the same time, the forensic analysis on the guns was complete, but the results were inconclusive. And we know that that's bullshit, right? Like, if you've listened to my critically
100%.
acclaimed
Patreon episodes.
then you know.
2-part series.
Right, that gun analysis is
Yeah.
is very subjective at best.
Totally.
They didn't have enough evidence to keep Peel in custody, so they let him go. When they looked into John Peel's background, they found an easygoing guy with no criminal record. There was nothing in the past that would suggest he was capable of killing 8 innocent victims. A year before the murders, Peel got married and had a son with his new wife. He was described as friendly and even-keeled. Despite being fired by Mark, multiple people say that Mark and Peel remained friendly. Mark and Irene even bought Peel a wedding present despite things not working out with Mark's sister and after Mark fired him.
Yeah. I mean, people get fired.
Right.
It doesn't seem like great motive to kill 8 people.
Right. Including
burn
2
down a ship.
tiny children.
Yes, that seems very unhinged if that's the case.
Yep. There were even witnesses who saw Peel at Mark's birthday party the night of the massacre and said they were friendly.
Uh-huh.
More months passed and police decided to release a new composite sketch of their suspect. They also turned to the media for help. I mean, I get the impression this was a very big deal anyway, but I think they asked the media to, like, re-up their...
Jump back in. Right.
The renewed interest in the case brought in more leads. One man went to the detectives and told them on the day of the fire he saw a man who looked just like the man in the sketches get off a skiff at the dock in Craig. I mean, so he was like number 11 of the 12 people that lived there who also saw somebody get off a skiff on the dock.
Right.
They had him look at a photo lineup, and the witness picked Peel's photo as the man he saw.
No shit. Peel's steel on the hook.
Peel is steel on the hook.
I was just about to let Peel off the hook.
I know. I don't know what to do. What are we going to do?
What is happening?
Yeah. And also, just during the same time, Peel took multiple polygraph tests and failed them all. Just a little side note.
Yep.
With this new eyewitness, authorities believed they had enough to arrest Peel for the murders of all 8 victims and for 1 count of arson. So that's all it took.
Shit.
Was one positive identification
ID.
of a guy getting off his skiff on the dock.
Wow.
He was arrested on September 10th, 1984, almost exactly 2 years after the massacre took place, and was extradited to Alaska to await trial.
I'm so curious about Peel.
Yeah.
I need to know everything.
There isn't a lot to know, but I will tell you all I have.
Okay, great. I'm scared of it.
He pleaded not guilty and would have to wait until January of 1986 for his trial, but during Peel's preliminary hearing, a Ketchikan Superior Court judge dismissed the charges against him after the prosecution presented the evidence they had. He was like, nah, that's just not good enough. You don't have enough. Mm-hmm. The only eyewitness they had who said for sure it was Peel saw him getting off his skiff that day after the murders, but didn't see him commit any crimes. Mm-hmm. He didn't even see him near the investor.
Yep.
Nothing. Just got off a skiff.
Like you do in a boat harbor.
As a fisherman.
Career fisherman.
Yep.
Got it.
So none of the witnesses who had seen the man driving the investor the morning after the murders or the guy coming back on the skiff from the fire, none of them would identify Peel as the man they'd seen.
Right, because multiple people had been shown his image at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, those two people from the casino were at the bar. They were the two that went to the bar.
Right.
And Peel was there, and they said, no, he's not the guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge ruled that Peel could still be tried for the crimes, but the prosecution would need to find more evidence.
Yeah, one would hope.
Right. But instead, prosecutors quickly put together another grand jury who indicted Peel a second time.
What? No. Yes. Why do you got to bring this fucking stuff to my life?
I know.
You know I cannot handle false imprisonment. It makes my skin crawl. It's my biggest fear. Yep. Literally my biggest fear.
I know.
Son of a bitch.
So Peel's trial started in January of 1986, as it was originally planned. So the prosecutors were able to get the second trial going so quickly that they were able to keep their original trial date.
Wow.
Yeah. This trial dragged on for 6 months.
Jesus.
And was the longest and most expensive trial in Alaska history.
How? They don't have any evidence.
No,
what are they
I don't know.
They're just talking about it. So
bringing in all 600 of Craig's population. I saw a man on a skiff. I also saw a man on a skiff.
Is it this man? No, it's definitely not that man. Maybe. Well, we'll see in 3 weeks. We're going to ask you again. Yeah. What could they possibly have to talk about for 6 months?
I don't know.
That is bizarre.
I don't know. Yeah. And
because
there was no evidence.
Down. There's no evidence.
Exactly.
Yes. There's no fingerprints. There's no fibers. There's nothing. No, it's just a burnt down boat and horrible massacre.
And unfortunately, bone fragments and some other charred remains.
No.
Yep.
I'm very not okay with this.
So the jury deliberated for 6 days, but were deadlocked at a 7-5 split, favoring a not guilty decision.
Who would ever say guilty?
Five of the 12.
How could you do that?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't think we knew a lot about how evidence works. I don't think most people do. And if I wasn't doing this podcast and Sadie hadn't done that, honestly, the award-winning 2-part series on forensic evidence for our Patreon, I wouldn't know all the things that I know. But back then, I guess they definitely wouldn't. But you can't just gossip your way through a trial and then convict a man of 8 counts of first-degree murder and arson based on nothing.
Right.
Fuck that.
So the trial, the longest and most expensive trial in Alaska history at the time, ended in a hung jury. Good. No decision could be made.
Ugh.
But prosecutors went after it again.
Of course they did. And
Peel was tried again in 1988. The prosecution didn't change its tune and presented almost all of the same information.
What the fuck?
Except this time, they had 2 new witnesses who claimed in the months after the killings they had gone fishing with Peel, who admitted to the murders.
Nope. I don't buy that for 1 second.
Peel's defense attorney was able to pull the story apart and proved both witnesses had agreed to testify in Peel's trial in order to get their own unrelated charges dropped.
Of course they did.
Yep.
Of course they did.
This time, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Peel not guilty on all charges.
Oh, thank God.
There simply wasn't enough evidence against him.
Oh, I'm so relieved. I'm still scared, but I'm relieved. I don't trust you to not pull some bullshit and bring out some other prosecutory, but he was in the Navy, so then the feds tried him as a Navy man.
No, none of that. None of this. None of that. He's good. No double jeopardy.
Peels.
He's done.
What was I saying before? Peels.
Heels.
Peels, not steel on the hook. Peel feels to be on the hook presently.
So the trial took almost 5 years of Peel's life, and hundreds of
Peel.
thousands of dollars were spent for his defense. He sued the state of Alaska for $150 million.
Good.
In this lawsuit,
with inflation,
how much would it be?
45 trillion.
Yes. So in the lawsuit, he had also asked for the investigation to continue. Several years later, Peel reached a settlement of $900,000.
It's not nothing.
No.
It's not equal to 5 years of a man's life, but it's not nothing.
Yeah, and I think he wasn't in jail the whole time.
Still, I mean,
that's all you get to do.
Horrible thing to do to a human being. That is
Yes.
a horrible thing to have to wait for 5 years to find out if you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. That's
No, that's terrible.
yep.
So Mark's family was devastated by the verdict. Of course they were,
Yep.
and believed a guilty man got away with murder.
Oh, buddies.
In 2016, so really very recently, Mark's sisters Lisa and Lori decided to sit down and talk to Peel. When the sisters asked him if he'd been the one to kill all those people, they said he looked him straight in the eye and said no. Mm-hmm. They asked if he had any idea who may have committed the crimes, and he said he had no idea. Mm-hmm. Both sisters left the conversation believing he probably wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, but that he knew more about the murders than he was letting on. Mm-hmm. And I also can't imagine going through the trial.
No, I was going to say.
This, that the prosecutors and the police and everybody this is our guy. We know for sure, we'll get through the trials, blah, blah, blah. And you can't believe that this is happening for nothing, right?
Well, also, he would have said, if he knew something else, he would have said it during his trial.
You would hope so, unless, he's so afraid of who did it that he, but there just isn't any evidence of that. There isn't any evidence that there was more than, there isn't any evidence, period.
Right. Period,
so we don't really know. It doesn't
fuck?
seem like there was more than one person who committed the crime, but we don't know.
Right.
We have no idea. There's 1,000 boats on that water, and who knows what happened.
What the hell?
In an interview with People magazine, Peel said, quote, "Somebody was responsible for this. Somebody out there knows what happened, but I'm not going to waste any more of my life on it." It was a very brief interview. Again, I don't blame him.
End quote. Yeah, I don't blame him at one bit.
So despite the lack of a conviction, the state of Alaska considers the investor fishing boat murders solved.
Come on.
Case closed, dude.
How can you not want to know who went on a boat, killed 8 innocent people, including 2 children, and then burnt down this $1 million boat? I mean, there's 11,000 felonies there in one.
Right.
It's not closed. It's not solved. That is crazy.
Yep.
That is crazy.
Yep. The case has officially been closed. It's done, skis. They're not investigating it ever again.
I'm imagining that I've watched enough Dexter recent season to know that far northern towns don't have real robust police forces,
right?
If at all.
Yep.
Usually it's like a deputized, bulldog or something that's just sort of keep and watch. So I don't blame them, but you would think that the FBI or somebody would come.
I think the FBI did
involved.
step in, but I didn't hear any details of what that looked like for them.
Right.
I do think they came in and helped, but there was no evidence,
Right.
Just...
Right. And there's 4 people, and none of them. They're like, yeah, not him. Mm-hmm. Wow, man. That's so unfortunate.
Yep. So they officially closed the case and have no plans to reopen the investigation. It's hard to imagine that someone like Peel could kill all 8 victims on the investor, especially the children. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what I believe. I mean, I really don't think that Peel did it.
Yeah.
But it does seem like all 8 victims were killed because they likely knew their killer and he didn't want to be identified.
Totally. Sounds very personal. Sounds
very personal,
brutal, and vengeful.
And also, well, we'll talk about it more here in a minute.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it seems like we will never know what happened to Mark, Irene, her unborn baby, Kimberly, John, Mark, Jerome, Dean, and Mike. Just so many people.
Yeah, it's insanity.
And that's the story.
Ah.
Investor fishing boat murders.
I do not like it.
I know.
I'm so glad Peel didn't get just like jammed into a conviction, but I just... Some people knows that. Some people know what happened. At least one person does. Maybe that person's dead now, but that sucks, man. That is a big old suck. Put it in the suck pile for Courtney's brain.
Totally.
Because Courtney's brain wants to know why.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
there was like theories that people thought that Mark kept his earnings in cash on the boat.
Right.
But there was also like multiple accounts of him needing to borrow money. Like he needed to borrow money to pay for his birthday dinner because he doesn't keep any cash on his boat at all.
Yeah, because who would? That's like crazy.
When he didn't do any of his, his transactions with the boat, with the fishing people. All of that was, like a credit to an account that he would then go to the bank and get the money out later.
Right.
He's not gonna be like, yeah, give me the $30,000 cash. Like
totally.
That's when the fishing pirates would come in.
Well, I would assume that that's just sort of an understood thing, that you don't keep heaps of cash on boats because pirates are coming for you anyway. They want your boat.
Right.
And probably your people more than they want, they're not... I would never think that you would keep a bunch of cash on a boat. That sounds crazy.
And there's also theories out there that it was drug smuggling gone bad, that was a huge part of the industry. I guess there was a nearby island that was all a marijuana grow island. So maybe, but then again, if it was a drug thing, if they got on the boat, killed all 8 people, they wouldn't have gone to the trouble to bring the boat out, to wait for it to sink. When it didn't sink, they'd go back to it. Like all of that makes me feel like it was somebody inexperienced trying to cover up.
Right.
Like feeling guilty or wanting to cover up the crime. If it was a drug smuggler or drug dealer, he would have just killed the people and left.
Right. Or killed them and then just lit the boat on fire and walked
right
away.
there on the dock or whatever. Yeah, he wouldn't.
They would have known what to do, basically. They wouldn't have like floundered and come back a day later and did some weird cover up. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it was Peel or if it was somebody known to Mark and Irene and they got in an argument and they started killing, like they, who knows? And then they had to kill everybody because they knew him. Like, I think it was maybe something more like that, but yeah, it's so awful.
Truly is. Truly awful.
Yeah.
And the fact, that all 8 of them were victims. None of them were able to get away. I mean, just logistically even, like they couldn't, which makes me feel like there was more than one gunman, maybe, or maybe they held someone hostage. Ugh, I don't even like thinking about any of it. It's so sad and so upsetting.
No, or they were able to kill more of the people while they were sleeping.
Right.
The gunshots they heard was, it was like 2 a.m.
Yep. Nope. Thanks for nothing.
No.
God, why do you do this to the people? AKA me. Specifically me.
I was going to start doing like a deeper dive into all the theories. And then I was like, it just doesn't really matter. It's just, they're gone. And nobody's doing anything. And there wasn't any other like concrete possible suspects or theories or... Yeah. They're just like, bye-bye.
So crazy.
Not this crazy. One guy who happened to be having drinks at the bar at the wrong time.
Right. Unless the deputized bulldog was in on the drug thing, which is a possibility. Drugs does sound, like if you're small town Alaska and you're trying to like get your foothold in the drug trade. Maybe you're like a newbie and you think you're going to be a bad dude and go and kill some people and get their drugs. And I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really matter, but
Yeah.
drugs or some kind of smuggling or revenge. My gut says revenge.
Yep. And honestly, I watched a show about this, and they interviewed Larry, the captain of I forget which one it was, the Decade or the one that came up with all the information saying that Peel wasn't on the boat.
Ooh, get a little.
This is it's on my like total speculation.
Allegedly,
he
Larry
had
is
some shifty eyes like
creepy creep.
Yeah. So I was like, maybe it was him.
Yeah. What do you guys think? What do you think?
Tell us. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. What do they say? Hit the alert ding-a-ling
Smash
button.
that like button below.